Thanks, Jordan. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for the Fireside Chat with Michael McGarry and Ann Foulkes of PPG Industries. As we pass the one-year mark on the global pandemic, today we have a rare opportunity for gaining insight from the CEO of a global corporation that has and is continuing to navigate the challenges of this unprecedented environment. My name is Bob Krisner, and I'm the chairman of the board for the National Association of Corporate Directors, the Three Rivers chapter. I also serve on the board of directors of Dollar Bank. Today's event is presented by both the NACD Three Rivers chapter and the Association for Corporate Growth Pittsburgh chapter. I'd like to welcome the members and attendees from each of these associations. I would also like to welcome and introduce Chairman of the Association for Corporate Growth Pittsburgh chapter, Kenny Ogilvie. Kenny's day job is chairman of EHS Support. Kenny, I want to thank you for teaming up with us today on this great event. I'd also like to take a moment and just briefly describe the two associations. The Association for Corporate Growth was founded in 1954 and has chapters worldwide representing 15,000 members. ACG serves 90,000 investors, executives, lenders, and advisors to growing the middle market companies. ACG's mission is to drive middle market growth. ACG has been around in Pittsburgh since 1985 and has over 350 members. The National Association of Corporate Directors was founded over 40 years ago and has more than 20 chapters throughout the United States, representing 21,000 members. Its mission is to elevate board performance by providing board members with practical insights through world-class education, leading-edge research, and an ever-growing network of directors. The Three Rivers chapter of the NACD has been around since 2005 and has over 700 members. The chapter is focused on promoting good corporate governance in the cities of Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Buffalo. The Three Rivers chapter was founded on the belief that good corporate governance is the key to building strong economies. I want to also sincerely thank all of our sponsors from both of these outstanding organizations. You can see their logos on the screen, but as you know, we would not be here without their generosity and kindness, both prior to and throughout this pandemic. Programs like these are possible because of them. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor or a member, please contact Michael Whitfield. As the virtual programming continues, sponsors and members receive complimentary attendance to all the regular in-person and virtual event programming like today's Fireside Chat. Today, we have a distinguished moderator in Ann Foulkes, Senior Vice President and General Counsel of PPG Industries. I'll turn the program over to Ann.
Thank you very much, Bob. Michael and I are very pleased to be here today. I thought maybe I'd just start with a very brief introduction of myself as well as Michael, and then we'll get started on the questions. So I've been at PPG for 26 years. I started my legal career here in Pittsburgh at Eckert Siemens, Charon and Malott, where I spent 5 years doing litigation. Since coming to PPG, I've worked in a variety of roles. I've supported all of the businesses commercially. I supported EH&S, Latin America, and I was corporate secretary for 7 years, and I became general counsel in August of 2018. Just a brief introduction of Michael. Michael, as you all know, is chairman and CEO of PPG. He became CEO in September of 2015 and chairman of the board in September of 2016. Michael is a native of New Orleans and a lifelong PPGer. He came to PPG right out of college at the University of Texas, started at our Lake Charles Chemicals complex as an engineer in 1981, and has obviously progressed through a number of roles to where he is today. And I think you'll find that Michael has a lot of great knowledge and perspective about PPG. So with that, we'll begin our program. We welcome questions from the audience. If you have a question, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom to ask your questions, to type them in, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. So with that, let me start, Michael. PPG was established nearly 140 years ago in 1883, right here in Pittsburgh. Can you talk a little bit about PPG's history and heritage?
Sure, Ann, and thanks. Appreciate the invite to today's event. If you go back, PPG was founded in 1883 by Captain John Ford and John Pitcairn, and it was to build glass, the old way of making glass. In 1899, we back integrated into soda ash to provide soda ash to make glass. And then in 1900, we got into our coatings business with the first acquisition of a coatings facility in Patent Paint in Milwaukee. So we were in these three businesses for a long time, and we went by Pittsburgh Plate Glass until about 1968. And in 1968, we changed our name to PPG because obviously we did more than plate glass. And of course, we'd moved away from plate glass and making float glass, so even the old name didn't make a lot of sense. But what I always tell people is the company has evolved over the years, and it's much different today than it was back then, but it was founded right here in Pittsburgh, like so many other great industrial companies.
Thanks, Michael. So what do you think have been the keys to PPG's success over all of these years?
I think the biggest one is continuing to evolve with the times. So if you think about what happened over the years, right, in 1980s, early 1980s, we saw China becoming a great opportunity, great market. So our first foray into China was licensing our glass technology. At that time, nobody could ever envision that you could actually ship glass from China back to the US because it's so heavy. But that's in fact what happened over the years, is that freight rates got so low and global markets became so competitive that you could actually ship glass back this way. So in about 1898, we put a group together that looked at the strategy of PPG. And what we decided was that, in glass, we had good technology, but it was very cyclical and it was hard to consistently return a reasonable return on capital. And then we looked at our commodity chemical business, and even though we had the best operating business around and great cash flow, it was highly cyclical. And Wall Street never gave us credit for the peaks because all they looked for was the next valley. And so over a cycle, it was a good business, but it was a challenging business to explain to Wall Street. And then from our coatings business, what we really learned was that you could sell technology, people would pay for technology, it had very sticky customers, and it was a business that could be consolidated. So over the years, we've been working this strategy to become a much more of a coating-centric company. And so in 2013, we separated our commodity chemicals business and formed a new company and spun that off to our shareholders. In 2015 and 16, we separated our glass business and fiberglass business. And then we got bigger in coatings along the way. So many acquisitions in the last probably 15 years. We probably made more than 50 acquisitions in the coating space. And we continue to drive acquisitions. So now we're essentially, I always say we're a coatings company, but we're about 96% coatings and 4% specialty materials. And we want to get bigger in specialty materials. So we always say we're paints, coatings, and specialty materials. So back to your original question, Ann, it's about evolving with the times and not, being stuck in the past.
Thanks, Michael. Why has Pittsburgh been the right place to call home for the company's global headquarters throughout its 140-year-old history?
Well, that is a question we continue to ask ourselves, right? Because there's a lot of ramifications of being based here in Pittsburgh. Some are good and some are bad. You could start with the corporate tax rate for the state of Pennsylvania. It's one of the highest around, so that would be a negative. Not having allowing net operating losses in Pennsylvania can be a challenge, right? But the people here, the climate, the ability to raise a family, the schooling, and the ability to attract talent are all positives. So it's something we're continuing involved. We've been based here since 1883. We have a lease on our current building. that goes out for another 7 or 8 more years. So we're going to continue to be based here, but I would tell you that it's not a given. You know, every day, just like in all the communities in which we live and operate, we have to earn the right to live and operate in Pittsburgh. And there are a lot of reasons to be here, but we always have to make sure we're making the right, best decision looking forward.
Thank you, Michael. Let's talk a little bit about you and your background. I know everybody's probably very interested in that. So you've been with PPG for about 40 years. As I mentioned earlier, you came to PPG right out of college. Why has the company been a good place for you to have such a long career?
I'd say the first thing, Ann, and for the folks on the call, is opportunity. You know, I've been fortunate. In 40 years, I've had 21 different jobs. So I really never got bored in any job that I had. And I've always had a greater challenge in the current job than the prior job. And those things, because of that, you know, always gave me a reason to stick around and to see what's coming next. And plus, I think the company is so diverse, right? I've been very fortunate. I worked in Thailand from 1989 to 1991. I lived in Europe from 2006 to 2008. Worked in commodity businesses, specialty businesses. I've had accountability for some of our glass businesses, our fiberglass businesses, all of our coatings businesses over time, and our chemical businesses. So, you know, it was always learning. And to me, as long as you're learning, it's a great opportunity. And with the diversity that PPG has, you know, we have operations in more than 70 countries. We sell in about 140 countries. So there's always something new to learn. And I think it's that excitement about getting up in the morning and wondering what you're going to learn today that keeps me going.
Great, thanks, Michael. So for someone joining a company out of college like you did from University of Texas, what advice would you have for a new employee starting at PPG?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, to me, it's all about working for good people and a company that has a bright future. You know, the last thing you want to do is go work for some place that you can't understand their mission, you can't understand their purpose, you can't understand where they're going. It's probably not a good place for you. But if you go someplace and you understand what makes them tick, you understand how they make money, you understand why they're important to their customers, and then they have a vision about where they're going, I think those are all good things to look for in companies. I think in the case of PPG, it's the fact that we're constantly modifying how we go to market to win new business. And it's about our opportunity to create new future opportunities in the world. Like right now, it's electric vehicles, right? We're trying to enable electric vehicles by the way we sell our product into batteries. And so, you know, we're always, you know, I always say that we're 138 years young as opposed to 138 years old.
Thanks, Michael. So in addition to your very heavy workload as chairman and CEO of PPG, you serve on a corporate board currently, US Steel. You also serve on a nonprofit board, the Cultural Trust. You're also on the Allegheny Conference Board, and you also serve on the American Coatings Association board. So first of all, how do you find the time to do all of that? And second, what leadership approach do you take in those roles?
Well, the first thing is, and just like at PPG, you always want to have the best people, and you want to have the right people in the right chairs at the right time. And I mean, if you take the Cultural Trust, we have a great leader in Kevin McMahon. There's nothing I can do to educate him about the Cultural Trust. He just, you know, would like to have somebody to chat with every once in a while and some deep pockets to touch and think about where he wants to go in his next career. I mean, he's a great leader. I mean, the same thing with Stephanie Pashman and the Allegheny Conference. You know, we picked her a couple of years ago, doing a great job. And, you know, with the American Coatings Association, our president and CEO there, Andy Doyle, has been doing that job for a while. And these are highly competent people and don't require that much time and attention. So it's easier. It's when things are going off the rails that take a lot more time. So I always tell people before you get onto any board, make sure that's somebody you want to be in the foxhole with, because when times get tough, you're going to spend a lot of time with them. And it's much easier to spend time with people you like than people you don't like. So when I looked at whether or not I wanted to join the U.S. Steel Board, you know, compatibility with the other board members was important, right? Collegium, you know, having a place where you can go and learn things is important. And in each of the things that I work on, I want to learn something. I just don't want to go and sit and be in a meeting. Now, we all have a lot of time that we could sit in a meeting, but it's not a good use of our time. So I'd much rather go someplace where I can be a contributor. And for us, these are opportunities where I enjoy spending some of my time.
Great. Thanks, Michael. So let's turn to the topic that's been on everybody's mind for the last 14 months, and that's the pandemic, the COVID virus. So we have a facility, as you know, in Wuhan, China, where the pandemic first began, and the company has facilities in more than 70 countries around the world. When was PPG first made aware of the pandemic, and how has PPG navigated and managed through this very challenging time?
Well, the issue in Wuhan came to our attention probably very, very early January. So even though it started before that in Wuhan, it didn't create that much of attention. And then in early January, I started getting calls from our Chinese leadership team because we have a global leadership meeting in late January, around the 23rd of January every year. And the meeting was going to be in Florida. And they were talking about Wuhan and whether or not they should be coming to that global leadership meeting, given all the challenges that were going on in Wuhan. And then, of course, it escalated from there. And what really got my attention is when they place all these big boulders on the outskirts of Wuhan to keep the residents in Wuhan. That's when I knew that it was going to be more than just a local Chinese issue, that they were worried about this spreading beyond China. And of course, as you know, and many people on this call know, you know, PPG is one of PPG's most important businesses is aerospace. And we facilitate people flying around the world because of the coatings, sealants, and adhesives and transparencies that we sell for airplanes. And, you know, people are on planes all the time. And with the global nature nowadays of people traveling, it was a matter of not if, but a matter of when it was going to leave China and go elsewhere. And so, you know, for us, you know, we started planning for this in January when we started hearing about it. In late January, right before Chinese New Year, we talked to our Chinese teams about making sure you shut down the plants to leave them down and in a state such that they could be down for 2 or 3 weeks. We never had any envision it would be down for as long as it was. But we also knew that they would be ready to come back to work shortly after Chinese New Year. So they were down, you know, 4 to 6 weeks. And then we saw ricochet around the world, from there to Italy, Italy to Western Europe to the US, here to Mexico, and then down to Latin America. So it's been quite an interesting exercise in making sure our people are safe, understanding what's coming. And as you know, we already have people back to work fully in the office in China. Our people are now starting to go back to work in our offices in Australia and New Zealand. And we've had people in and out of the offices in Europe and the US. And so it is all about keeping our people safe first and foremost.
Thanks, Michael. What were some of the biggest challenges that PPG faced during the pandemic?
I'd say the biggest one is making sure the learnings are shared rapidly. And the other one is that you can't run the world from Pittsburgh. So when we started shutting down our plants in China, we developed shutdown procedures to make sure that we shut them down, that we didn't know how long they'd be shut down for. So the procedures to shut them down in a clean, orderly fashion. You know, think about what happened in Texas recently with the freezes. That came upon people, they weren't prepared, they shut down. They haven't been able to get back up and running quite at the same rate because they weren't shut down in a orderly manner. So we did much better at that. Same thing with moving over into Europe and then to the US and into Latin America. Making sure we were stocked up with PPE. I can remember one of our local health community places was short on PPE. And because we have a global supply chain, we were able to outfit them with PPE. And it was interesting because our Chinese suppliers said, hey, we're happy to send it, but we want to get paid by PPG and not by your local health organization. So, we ended up writing checks to our Chinese suppliers and then getting reimbursed from our friends here in Pittsburgh. And of course, donating PPE everywhere we could. Those were all learning opportunities. And then the other one is starting back up again, because you have to start the plants back up again. We have essential workers around the world. So, think about our architectural stores. In the US, we have more than almost 900 stores. We went to a click and collect or a click and deliver model. And so the stores were not open, but yet the stores were available to do business. So that was another important learning opportunity. We, brought those skill sets back to Europe on how to do that. And so it was a constant sharing of best practices and refining them and making them better and ensuring that we kept our people safe.
Thanks, Michael. What would you say surprised you the most during the pandemic and the PPG's response to the pandemic?
I would say the biggest surprise was probably how inconsistent various countries took on their response to the pandemic, right? So in China, they were able to develop rapid testing much faster and much more uniform than the US. I mean, it was probably only about 4 or 5 months ago where there was a small outbreak in Tianjin, which a lot of people in this call might not know where Tianjin is, but it's a northeast city in China. And within 48 hours, they had tested 2.5 million people. We've never developed that capability here in the States. Korea did a lot of the same thing, but then you had Sweden take a much different approach than Germany, which took a different approach than the Netherlands, which took a different approach. So it really goes to show how local politics can have a major influence on a response. And probably the biggest disappointment is, how we have not learned as much about the pandemic and the disease itself as I wish we would have. I mean, great kudos to Operation Warp Speed. It's been a tremendous success, but there's still a lot of things we don't know about this. I mean, people of color are being impacted by this COVID-19 much more than a lot of other people, and we still don't have enough insight into the whys. So there's more to learn here.
Thanks, Michael. And I know something that was very important to you throughout the pandemic was supporting our people, our customers, and the communities in which we operate. Can you talk a little bit about how you did that, what you thought about in terms of those issues?
Well, it's actually been broadened, as you know, and give a little kudos to you. You're on the food bank board, and the need for food. It was always astounding to me when I saw the TV pictures of the number of people waiting in line for food in Pittsburgh. You don't think about that. So we had to broaden our horizons. Normally our foundation is mostly focused on STEM or science, technology, engineering, and math. So we broadened that. And of course, the George Floyd affair, murder has brought that to another level with the way we treat people, that we need to do a better job. So we really have broadened our horizon on this. And, we need to do better. So, it wasn't just donating PPE. It wasn't just donating money. It was getting involved in the local communities to make sure that we could, impact the community in a very positive manner. And there's still a lot more to be done. I think last year we donated $13 million, which is the largest amount of money we've ever donated in PPG's history.
Let's talk a little bit about the business, Michael, and the effect of the pandemic on the business and just in general, PPG's business. So tell me, how has the pandemic affected PPG's growth, and how are the key regions and markets currently performing?
Well, that really depends a lot by business, right? So early on in the pandemic, we had some businesses that were very positively impacted, right? So our food business had a lot of pantry stocking. So if you think about it, when you're cooking at home, you're buying tomatoes in a 12-ounce can, and we coat the inside and outside of a can. And if you go into a restaurant, those same tomatoes might be in a gallon can, and there's a whole lot less paint on a gallon can than there are, and I probably should know this, some cook on this will tell me how many pints are in a gallon, but let's call it 16. I think that's about right. So there's a lot more, paint on individual cans than there are on a big can. So our food business, our packaging business was beneficial. The shift toward more aluminum packaging is also ongoing during the pandemic. So less plastic. So that's obviously a positive for our business. People working from home, they got home, they looked at their four walls and said, oh, that wall needs to be painted. And I'm not doing anything else this weekend, so I'm going to go out and paint. So our architectural walls and halls business was very positively impacted. Now, conversely, we had a number of businesses that were negatively impacted. So if you think about our aerospace business, the number of people going through TSA dropped by 90%. So the number of planes flying at one point were down 75%. It got back to 50%, but even today, only there's about 40% of the planes are not flying, and very few international flights are flying. So that's bad for our business. If you take another one of our businesses with our refinish business, so if you get in an accident, repaint your car, that also had a significant decline as miles driven dropped. At one point, miles driven had dropped almost 40%. It's kind of stabilized now at about down 10%. But that, leads to a lot less congestion. It used to be I'd come to work very early in the morning because I hated traffic. Now I can drive to work anytime because there's no congestion in the city of Pittsburgh. So that's not good for our refinish business. But when you add it all up, the second quarter of 2020 was down, earnings wise, was down 50% with volume down about 20. In the third quarter, our volume was down about 10%, but our earnings were all-time record. And in the fourth quarter, again, our volume was down about 5%, and we had an all-time record adjusted earnings per share. So we've adapted. We've adjusted our workforce. We've adjusted our productivity. We've been much more nimble in this environment, much more stuff going digitally. And so the company is in really good shape, but there's more work to be done. And certainly we'd love to have all our volume back, but I am happy to see more people flying. Obviously, we want them to do it flying with masks on and not, traveling unsafely. But that's going to be a big positive for us in 2021.
Great. Thanks, Michael. So PPG, as you well know, has made a lot of acquisitions. In fact, we've made more than 50 acquisitions over the last decade, with just 6 in the last year. How important is inorganic growth to PPG's overall business strategy?
Well, inorganic growth is hugely important. The coating space is still a consolidating space. The top 10 global coatings guys still only have 50% market share. And if you think about the halls and walls business, so your local paint business for a consumer, that's a very unconsolidated market. In virtually almost every country in the world, there's still a lot of families that own those businesses. So if you go to Germany, there's 3 families that own, 85% of the paint market for architectural paint in Germany. We're fortunate. We just are about to buy the number 1 company in Finland, and with Tikkurila, our Finnish friends are number 1 there. They're number 1 in Sweden. They're number 1 in the Baltics. They're number 1 in Russia. So, this was a family-owned business. 20% of it was owned by one family. So there are a number of these opportunities that are still out there, but there's still more opportunities on the automotive side, on the refinish side, the protective and marine side, the industrial side. So we've been working hard at consolidating this space, and we're going to continue to look at inorganic growth as a means to drive our stock price.
Great, thanks. And that was inorganic growth. Let's talk a little bit about PPG's organic growth. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for PPG's growth, and what's driving PPG's innovation in this space?
Well, innovation is highly important to us, right? We spend about almost $480 million a year on R&D. We employ thousands of people We're great hirers of PhD chemists around the world. We really feel like innovation is the backbone to our future success. One of the challenges about our innovation is every time we innovate, it becomes more efficient than the prior version. So we're kind of cannibalizing our own sales volumes as we grow. So the most recent one, we had what we call compact process, where we put down multiple layers of paint down at one time. So on a car, you would have an e-coat, a primer, a base coat, and a clear coat. And now we're putting on 3 layers of paint down at once. So instead of 70 mils of paint, it might be only 50 mils of paint. So we have to continue to innovate to make up for that lost volume. Some of the innovation we're doing in our packaging space is to take out what we call substances of concern. So a lot of people on this call may remember bisphenol A. That was a substance of concern that had a lot of mothers worried about as a potential endocrine disruptor. So we worked hard to take that product out of existence. And if you think about our refinish business, you know, it's always about productivity. How can you get one more car through the body shop faster than yesterday? So we've developed new technology we call Moonwalk, which is automatic paint mixing, which allows a painter to spend time painting the car and not mixing paint. Because I'm sure it would surprise a lot of people on this call, but we have a color library of about 5 million colors. So you think about all the cars in the US, a white car in Phoenix is not the same white that's in Pittsburgh. As you can imagine, it's 100 degrees in the summer in Phoenix, and it's 10 below zero in Pittsburgh. So the white ages differently. So we have to be able to color match all those things. And for a car, you got a plastic bumper, aluminum hood, a metal quarter panel, and a composite roof. And all those different substances have to look the same color as you match them. So for us, innovation is highly important. We're going to continue to invest a lot of money in innovation. Each one of our businesses has clear goals in that. But the one that excites me the most is electric batteries. You know, electric vehicle, not a hybrid, but a pure electric vehicle has 2 to 4 times as much coating on that as a internal combustion engine. And the reason for that is on the bottom of that car is a big battery. They call it a skateboard, but basically that battery is a box, and that box has to be painted. It has to have an adhesive to close it. On the inside of that battery box, there's going to be protective coatings to keep the batteries from catching on fire. They call them thermal events. We call them fires. There's going to be thermal gap fillers, which keeps the anode and cathode separate so it doesn't short out. And then eventually there's binders in there that are in the battery. And we want to get into the binder system as well, because they have substances of concern in that battery that we think over time they should move to a safer chemistry. And we think, given our knowledge of how to do things like that, we can do that. So this is a great big growth opportunity for us. We're excited to be part of electrifying the world, and we're spending a lot of time on it.
Great, thanks, Michael. Let's change direction a little bit. We've talked about, you know, Pittsburgh being the headquarters for PPG. We obviously have locations in many, many communities around the US and around the world, and we have a history of supporting those communities. Why is this important to you, and why is it important to PPG?
Well, I think you have to earn your right to open a plant anywhere, and you have to be good corporate citizens. And as you know, through our foundation, our local plant managers are on the foundation, and they can suggest how we can contribute local money to local communities to make them better. And that's what we want to do. And so we are focused on a number of STEM initiatives. We have broadened that to diversity, equity, inclusion. And of course, we're right now in the time of food insecurity that's also getting some attention. So we're going to continue to do that. We think it's important to be good corporate citizens. You know, our mission in life is still to be a profitable enterprise, but I always tell people the first thing to do if you want to be sustainable is make money. Because if you don't make money, you can't give it away, and you can't reward your shareholders. So Sustainability starts with having a good business model, good business practices, and good people.
That's a great tie over to my next subject, Michael, which was sustainability, which I know is very important to you personally. Your role, your history in the chemicals business, I know has made you very sensitive to that issue and very attuned to it, and it's something important to you. What role does sustainability play at PPG?
Well, for us, it's all about the future, right? So if you think about the coatings that we make, we're about protecting and beautifying the world. And so if you can make an asset last longer, that's going to be better for the world, right? So as much as I like making paint, if our paint allows a piece of equipment to last longer, then that's better for society. So we're working on a number of sustainability initiatives, all the way from the very mundane, like using less energy to make our paint, or producing less waste, or shipping less waste out of our plant. So right now we have about 35% of our plants are zero waste sites. So there absolutely no waste ever leaves the plant. And we want to get that up, getting more of our facilities on renewable energy. So we have a number of our facilities. Our most recent one in San Juan del Rio just went on to totally sustainable energy. We have a goal to reduce our carbon footprint. Those are all good goals, but there could be more to this, right? So improving the efficiency of our product, reducing what we call overspray, so that more of the paint ends up on the product they're painting is highly important. The other one, of course, is what we talked about with electric batteries, helping our customers reduce their own levels of emissions. So it's really nifty. The most recent Ferraris that are being built, I always tell people, if you own a Ferrari, you're 100% guaranteed to having PPG paint around. And we don't call it Ferrari red, we call it PPG red. But we just recently converted their paint shop from 140 degrees C curing paint to 80 degrees. So nearly a 50% reduction in the energy needed to cure the paint. When we launched our compact paint process, we reduced the number of ovens required to cure paint at our large automotive OEM customers from 4 ovens to 2 ovens. And the same thing when we're changing over refinish paint from solvent-based to water-based, the number of ovens and the temperature which it cures at also drops. So these are a number of initiatives that we have ongoing that are all, a step in the right direction. We can do more. We have very aspirational goals, but our goal here is to lead the coatings industry in our sustainability initiatives.
Thanks, Michael. I know this is a big topic for a lot of folks these days, how our stakeholders are looking at sustainability and what their expectations are of PPG with respect to sustainability.
Well, I think a lot of them have evolved in this regard, right? So originally they were focused on what are you doing on your own plant site? And then they broadened it to say, what are you doing between you and your customer? And then now they broaden it to, complete life cycle analysis. So from the time you take your raw materials out of the ground or out of the air or wherever you get it from, until it goes back to a natural resource, how are you managing that? And then some people have broadened that to ESG, so environmental, societal, and governance. Those are all strong words, and they're looking at that more broadly as well. And I think this is going to be a topic that continues to evolve over time. It's not going to be a static situation. I think certainly from a board perspective, our board is, counting on us to continue to evolve in this area. And I think all 3 of these ESG areas is going to be a major focus for us going forward.
Thanks, Michael. Let's move to another topic that I think you touched on a little bit earlier today, which was DE&I, which obviously is getting a lot of focus these days from a lot of companies and others. Following the tragic, senseless murder last year of George Floyd and other Black Americans, many companies spoke out and they said enough is enough. What was your and PPG's response?
Well, I think, all of us were aghast. Nobody can look at that video. I used to say 8 minutes and 46 seconds, but now I think they've upped that to like 9 minutes and 24 seconds. But I have no concept of why anybody would think that was an acceptable thing to do. And, you get a much better sense for how our, Black community thinks about this. They've been saying this has been going on for a long time. You weren't paying attention. And it really kind of struck home even further when you had the march on the Capitol. 5 people were killed, but that was a predominantly white group. Had that been a predominantly Black group, would there have been a lot more people killed? I would venture to say yes. And so, we need to, think about how we're managing our relationships, right? And I grew up in New Orleans. It's a very different city than Pittsburgh. It's 50% Black and 50% white. And, I've seen racism every day of my life growing up as a kid. It just was all too often what the city saw, right? And things are getting better, but we have a long way to go. And so what we as corporate leaders have to do is accelerate this process of getting smarter and better about how we deal with this. A lot of times I think it's a fear of the unknown, right? And so we need to educate people. And for us, that's highly important for us to educate. So when I think about, having better talent in PPG, it's about, getting a more diverse slate, right? And I know you know this, but, you were the first female on our executive committee, and it took us only 136 years to have that. Now, I think it's ludicrous to think that we didn't have a highly competent female that could have served on the executive committee before 136 years, right? Now, the good news is we have 40% of the executive committee is female. I could go through the stats for people of color in the company, and each one of these, there's an opportunity to get better. And what it takes is starting with a diverse slate, challenging the slate and making sure you pick the best person. And if you start with the diverse slate and pick the best person, you're going to come out with a diverse company. And I think about it from a competition standpoint. If 50% of the people in the world are female, and you don't have 50% female in your company, you're probably leaving talent behind. And why would you leave talent behind? And so for me, this isn't about male, female, people of color, non-people of color, gay, straight. It's none of that. It's about picking the best talent and winning. And the best way to win in the marketplace is to have the best people. And it's a diverse group of people. And I have a favorite saying, diverse teams perform better. And so for us, we're highly focused on getting more diverse teams.
Thanks, Michael. So I know PPG is doing stuff inside the company, as you describe, in terms of diverse slates and trying to create a more diverse and inclusive environment. Is PPG doing anything around social justice and equity outside of the company in terms of our giving and other things?
So we have been donating in that area. We've done more this year than we've ever done in the past. So social justice is at the top of the list. Policing reform would be another one that's we've donated to. And of course, now the most recent thing that's picked up, as you know, is Asian violence against Asians. So we're also providing some money in that regard as well. So I think this is an area that everybody's getting more sensitive to. But what I really wish we do is really just treat everybody with respect. And then, some of this stuff would go away. And, everybody's a human being, and we need to treat everybody in a fair and just manner.
Thanks, Michael. So the last topic I wanted to touch on, Michael, was leadership. And you've talked a little bit about it. We know that great companies have great leaders. How important is leadership at all levels of PPG?
Well, I don't think this is just a PPG thing, right? Leadership is what makes great companies go. And if you look around at some of the leading companies in the world, it takes, and it's not just the leader, it's a leadership team, right? Because there's a lot of time and attention to running a global business. And so, the key is to have the right people in the right spot at the right time. And so when we spend a lot of time on picking our leaders globally. And for us, It's about people who have the right ethics, the right values, the right leadership skills, and they get results in the right way. It's not just about getting results, but it's getting results in the right way. And I think our team has done a really good job of picking good leaders. And, there's always more talent out there. And one of my missions in life here at PPG is to make sure that when we look for leaders, we're opening the aperture on what a leader looks like. And they don't need to have pain experience to be a leader. They don't need to have science and technology as their background to be a leader. So there can be many different traits that lead to great leadership. And for us, it's all about finding the right people.
Thanks, Michael. What do you think is expected of today's leaders that may be different from leaders in the past?
I think the biggest thing is the ability to look around corners. In the past, you kind of kept your head down. You did what your predecessor did, and you try to do a little bit better than your predecessor. But the world is evolving so quickly. I mean, if you think about where a company like Amazon was 20 years ago versus where it is today, if you're not thinking digitally today, then you're probably woefully behind. I'd say the ability to rapidly assimilate information locally as well as globally is highly important. So where, we used to live in our own little bubble, maybe in Pittsburgh or maybe in the US, it's much more of a global world out there. And who we compete with can change on a daily basis. And so it's really important for us to find leaders who can, like I said, look around the corner. I think the other one that's probably different today than before is how you get results. It's not just the results, but it's how you do it. And, the people looking the other way when somebody has an ethical lapse, those days are long gone. And we need to make sure that our leaders are leading with the right skill sets and the right ethics.
Thanks, Michael. Those conclude the questions that I had. I'm going to look in our Q&A and see if there's anything that we've not already answered. So, Michael, the first question is, how is PPG addressing the increased emphasis on environmental, social, and governance, and how is the board monitoring this? I think you may have touched on a little bit, but maybe have anything else to add on that question, Michael?
Yeah, so we have a technology and environmental committee in PPG. And that committee is accountable to follow our ESG initiatives. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is our corporate secretary, myself, our head of investor relations, and our lead independent director. All of us get out and survey our top shareholders about what do they see in this area, what are their expectations. And then we do a lot of benchmarking as well. And then at the full board level, obviously, we're sharing where we are in this journey and then what does success look like going forward. So for us, this is still an area that we spend a lot of time on. And the board doesn't look at it just as a committee initiative. They're looking at it also as a total company initiative. And so that's why our lead independent director is involved in outward discussions as well.
Thanks, Michael. Another question from one of our audience members is, how does one prepare themselves to be on a board of a Fortune 500 company?
Well, I'd say the first thing is to be, excellent in the job that you have. That's really important. And to be a leader in your field, to be recognized as a leader. Boards, I think, are all looking for different things. So you probably know we have a skills matrix, so we're looking for finance people, we're looking for technology people, we're looking for digital people, we're looking for international people, for operations people, we're looking for people who are really good at M&A. Every board has a different skills matrix. So the first thing I do is pull out a couple of these proxies and look at the skills matrix and see, do I line up with that? The next one is I would make sure that I'm getting myself known. So on these various director committees, you can get to meet other directors, and meet people that way. I would get up to date on good governance. There's a number of governance practices that you should be familiar with. And then, obviously it's about knowing who the headhunters are, because most boards use headhunters, right, to go out and find board members, because we're looking for certain skill sets. I'd say in the old days, directors would get amongst themselves and pick friends of themselves. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. Nowadays, you have a nominating governance committee. They're very focused on diversity. They're very focused on skills. They're very focused on building an inclusive work environment, collegiality. And so those are all important factors to understand. So I would say it's about, broadening your networks and, staying current on what's going on in the business community.
Thanks, Michael. Another question asking us to talk about our risk management and compliance operating globally. I guess those are two things, but related.
Yeah, that's a big topic.
Yeah.
We call it ERM, Enterprise Risk Management, and it is a very bottom to top and then top back down to bottom approach. So we start with surveying our directors in the company about what the biggest risks they face within the businesses. And then we bring that up to the general managers and VPs about what the risks they face, either on a country basis or a manufacturing basis or a competitive basis, or think about cybersecurity, each of their different areas, from, legal, from the litigation risk. And then we bring that up and we rate those things about what could have the biggest impact on the company. And at that point, we share it with the board, and the board's first question is always, okay, so what? What are you going to do about it? So you've highlighted this, but so what? And then of course, it's up to us as a management team to then work on those issues to make sure we mitigate those risks or minimize those risks. And each one of those things can be different, right? So it could be the environmental risk, it could be cybersecurity, it could be manufacturing risks. Think about climate change. You have plants that are in places where if the ocean were to rise a meter, how would that impact your business? If you don't have water, how could that impact your business? So there's a number of these issues that we're working on. And then, typically we're assigning either a business leader or a functional leader to make sure that we make sure that that's not on the list for next year, or we ring fence it in such a way that we minimize the impact of that ERM issue on the company.
Thank you, Michael. You're right. That is a huge topic. Probably takes longer than a couple minutes. The next question, interesting question, Michael. What role does your board play guiding or governing the corporate culture at PPG? And I know culture is an important issue for you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. In 2018, as Ann knows, our operating committee, which is composed of about 12 folks in the company, spent about 9 months developing something we call the PPG way. It's the values of the company and how we expect people to live and operate. And we did that and rolled that out in 2019. And this was really a result of our survey. We used Gallup to do engagement surveys of the company. We weren't happy with where the engagement was. We has historically looked at engagement as, employees and how long they stayed around, and PPG, people come to PPG and they stay a long time. And so we have very low turnover. But then when you dig in under the surface, our engagement wasn't, we wanted to be much better at engagement. And so we challenged the team on that. And as we rolled out the PPG way and talked about engagement, we shared that with the board. And the board then tried to, they didn't try, they did raise the stakes further by saying, okay, well, let's, tell us how you're measuring this. So we're doing pulse surveys on how we're improving in this regard. We're sharing the engagement surveys. We ran the engagement survey in 2020, and a lot of companies did not run the engagement survey in 2020. We actually improved significantly in 2020 because our people say, hey, look, you did a lot of the right things in 2020. So when we did like salary cuts, we decided, as opposed to trying to, lay off a lot of people, we did have some layoffs, but we did, like, at the lowest level, a 1% salary cut, the next level up 2%, 3%, then 5 and 10. If you were a director, your salary was reduced 10. If you were a VP, it was reduced 20. If it was Ann, she was reduced 25%. It was me, it was 30%. So we had a scale where everybody took, your ability to take a salary reduction, impacted your what it was. And I would say the other thing that people looked at was the length. So for the executives, it lasted 4 months or 5 months, but for the hourly or the lower folks, it only lasted 3 or 4 months. So, the people that could afford to take the salary reductions had it impacted them more. And I think that impressed a lot of people. The way we did furloughs instead of layoffs impressed a lot of people. How we kept talking about the PPG way. We didn't walk away from our values. We upped our game as far as diversity, equity, inclusion, the additional giving. I think a lot of people saw that our purpose in life was to protect and beautify, and protect really meant a lot during the pandemic. Protecting our employees' health and safety was obviously number one. They saw that. So, when we did our engagement survey in 2020, the results improved significantly. And, the board was interested to see that. And now they've raised the bar again. So from a board standpoint, it's about setting expectations and then about holding the management team accountable. That's really what it boils down to.
Thanks, Michael. One other question. This question comes from a director of a PPG customer, Air Tractor in Onley, Texas. And he says they're very concerned about the supply chain challenges that many companies are facing post-COVID. And can you comment on how PPG is addressing the issues that U.S. industrial businesses are facing?
Well, first, a shout out to Air Tractor. This is a company that put in the first e-coat for aerospace parts. A little plug for Air Tractor. They make crop dusters. They're the world's leader in crop dusters. And they have a facility down in Texas and some really great people. And I couldn't be happier with them to call them a customer. But I think what the question that they're trying to get to is, with the Texas freeze, a number of facilities had challenges, and they have not all gotten back up and ramped up back to full speed. And that has meant that epoxies have been in short supply. Some specialty isocyanates are in short supply. And we're working very hard with our suppliers to make sure we can prioritize which products we're getting and in which order, so that we can meet our customer needs. I do view this as a short-term issue. I don't view this as a long-term issue. And I think the U.S. is in much better shape than the rest of the world, because what starts here does impact the rest of the world. And so Europe has also seen a shortage of raw materials. And I think this is going to be a challenging next 3 or 4 months as we work our way through this. The good news is the aerospace chain typically has more work in progress and more inventory than some of our other customers. If you think about our automotive customers, they're on a just-in-time basis. So some of those guys are having to shut down automotive plants because of lack of chips, lack of paint, lack of seats, lack of insulation, lack of adhesives. And so it's been a very challenging environment with the Texas freeze. We're going to have to continue to think about this from a long-term perspective. With climate change, are we going to have more frequent events like the Texas freeze? And if so, what can we do about it? Clearly, the insulation and the freeze protection in Texas is not to the level that we have in our facilities in the rest of the U.S. The refineries, the same thing. The refineries in Philadelphia are much better equipped to handle freezing weather than the refineries down in Texas. So there's a lot of opportunities to learn here, and we're certainly going to get better at it.
One question, Michael, near and dear to my heart. How do you mitigate FCPA risk with the diverse business practices considered acceptable at the local level?
No, well, man, maybe Ann, you should answer that since you're our general counsel, but the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, the first thing that my general counsel would tell me is no exceptions and no excuses. So, people think that facilitating payments might be okay in one country and therefore we should allow it. The answer is absolutely not. If you can't explain why you have an invoice on your desk and what every part of that invoice pertains to, not a good thing. If you get a consulting invoice and it's one line, probably not a good thing. So this is about risk recognition, and we know where the challenges are. So when we do business in Nigeria, and we're very large in protective coatings in Nigeria, we want to make sure that our people are doing it the right way. And we are very conscious about that. So, it's something we're going to be very aggressive on, and no excuses. So if anybody gets their hand caught in the cookie jar, I'm sorry, they're just, that's not an acceptable excuse to say that's how they do business there. We're based in the US, we're going to follow the US laws. In fact, we're going to go by the higher of the US law or the local law. That's our standard. And for us, this is something that we review on a regular basis. In fact, Ann and I are on our global ethics committee, and I chair that. That's how serious I think ethics violations are. And this is something that we spend a lot of time on. We have a compliance team that's dedicated toward looking into these kind of things. And we have hotlines. Now we call them helplines because we don't want people to think that's only for reporting bad things. But so we have helplines, and you can get to us by email, by mail, by calling, by any which way. We don't care how it comes in. If somebody has a concern, we want to be able to address it in a timely manner. And we then review these issues with the audit committee. And should it rise above the audit committee, we would certainly review it with the full board. But FCPA is something that's on the top of Ann and my list all the time.
Thanks, Michael. I'll just add a couple of things. As Michael said, we have a very robust process around FCPA. And, as many of you know, FCPA risks are often with third parties, with agents and distributors. So we have a very robust process before we bring on those folks, looking for any red flags. We manage that carefully. And as Michael said, there's a lot of countries where things are more sensitive, and we're very particular about those countries. But Michael is absolutely right. You have a standard, and that's the standard. And you don't get into local laws and sometimes pressure from your folks in the regions who say, oh, but we have to do this to get the business. That just isn't how we work.
Yeah, in fact, we have in our global ethics statement, we say we will stand behind any employee that has to give up business in order to be compliant with PPG's policies. And so it's well known that we want you to give up any business as opposed to breaking any local or PPG or US law.
And obviously we do a lot of training on that all over the world. That is the last question I saw in the Q&A. So I'm not sure if there's anything else. So if not, maybe I'll just turn it back over to Bob to conclude the session.
Great. Thanks, Ann and Michael. That covered so many relevant topics for this group. We really appreciate you taking your time out of your day to share those views with us. As an organization devoted to governance, and as a board member myself, I really appreciated hearing the governance stories and how those have been implemented at PPG. And just as a personal takeaway, I love the philosophy Michael spoke to on keep learning and be a contributor. I think that's something that is good guidance for all of us. I would like to thank everyone for attending today and for your questions. The team that supports us does a great job with these events, and you will be receiving a survey link that will be emailed to you following this event. And while the team does a great job, your feedback is always appreciated for how we can continue to get better. I would like to point out 2 upcoming events. Please join the ACG Pittsburgh chapter for their next virtual event on Tuesday, May 11th at 2 p.m., where the program topic will be growing diversity within small to mid-sized organizations. And then with respect to the NACD, please join us for our next virtual event on Thursday, May 6th at 5:30 p.m. as we celebrate our annual Director of the Year Award winners. Watch for your email for further information on both of these programs. And with that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Please stay safe, and we hope you enjoyed today's program. Thank you.